Hey, have you ever wondered where we should draw the line between free speech and hate speech?
Oh, absolutely. It's like one of those debates that just keeps popping up, especially with everything happening online these days.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, freedom of speech is such a fundamental right, but when does it cross over into something harmful?
Right. And different countries handle it so differently. It's fascinating and a bit confusing, honestly.
Yeah, like in the US, the First Amendment protects almost all speech, even if it's offensive.
But then you have places like Germany where hate speech laws are much stricter.
Exactly. They actually ban Nazi symbols and Holocaust denial. It's a stark contrast.
Yeah, and it raises the question, which approach is better for society?
That's the big question, isn't it? Is unrestricted free speech more valuable than protecting people from harmful rhetoric?
You know, it's like walking a tightrope. On one hand, you don't want to suppress people's rights to express themselves.
Right? But on the other hand, you don't want that freedom to enable harassment or incite violence.
Exactly. So what do we consider as freedom of speech then?
Well, generally, it's the right to express one's opinions without government censorship or punishment.
Yeah, it's fundamental to democracy. It allows us to challenge authorities and bring about social progress.
But then, when you think about the cons, unlimited free speech can lead to the spread of misinformation and hate speech.
True, and that's where things get messy. Who decides what's acceptable and what's not?
Exactly. It's like asking, who watches the Watchmen?
Haha, right. And when it comes to hate speech, definitions can vary so much.
Yeah? Hate speech typically involves language that insults, threatens, or discriminates against a person or group based on specific characteristics.
Like race, religion, gender, and so on.
Right? And examples include racial slurs or encouraging violence against a group.
But not all offensive speech is necessarily hate speech, right?
Exactly. Criticizing a religion, for instance, is free speech. But calling for violence against followers of that religion crosses into hate speech.
Yeah, and that's where the gray area lies.
And social media plays such a huge role in this nowadays.
Oh, absolutely. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook have their own policies, but enforcement is all over the place.
Yeah, and some argue that banning certain speech on these platforms limits free expression.
But others say it's necessary to prevent harm and misinformation.
It's a tough balance, like when Donald Trump was banned from Twitter after the January 6th events.
Right, some people saw that as censorship, while others thought it was a necessary step to prevent further violence.
Exactly. And it brings up the question, should private companies have the power to decide what's acceptable speech?
That's a big one. On one hand, they're private entities, but on the other, they've become the new public squares.
Yeah, it's like they're the gatekeepers of modern communication.
So maybe we need more transparent content moderation policies?
Yeah, and perhaps involving a diverse group in decision-making to avoid biases.
Agreed. But then again, there's the risk of censorship and limiting genuine free expression.
Right? It's like, where do we find that balance?
Maybe stronger media literacy could help people navigate information better?
Yeah, teaching people to identify misinformation and understand different viewpoints could make a big difference.
And encouraging open discussions without resorting to censorship might be more productive.
Definitely. It's important to create spaces where ideas can be challenged respectfully.
You know, it's like that saying, the cure for bad speech is more speech.
Exactly. Countering harmful ideas with better ones rather than just shutting them down.
But then, how do we protect vulnerable groups from actual harm?
That's a valid concern. Hate speech laws aim to prevent harassment and violence against these groups.
Yeah, but there's always the risk of those laws being misused.
Right? They could potentially be used to silence political opponents or suppress dissent.
So we're back to the same dilemma.
Seems like it. Maybe there's no perfect solution, but rather a constant effort to find the right balance.
Yeah, and perhaps involving the community in these decisions could help.
Definitely. Open dialogues and public education on these issues are crucial.
So, do you think society can protect free speech while also preventing hate and misinformation?
I think it's possible, but it requires vigilance and a commitment to those democratic principles.
Agreed. It's an ongoing effort and we all have a role to play.
Absolutely. Encouraging respectful debate and being mindful of the impact of our words is a good start.
Yeah, and holding platforms accountable for transparent policies.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's about fostering a society where ideas can be shared freely but responsibly.
Well said. It's a complex issue, but conversations like this help us move forward.
Definitely. So, shall we keep the dialogue going?
Absolutely. There's so much more to unpack.
Yeah, like how different cultures perceive free speech and the impact that has globally.
Oh, that's a whole other dimension.
Right? And then there's the role of education in shaping how people use their freedom of speech.
Yeah, teaching empathy and critical thinking from a young age could make a big difference.
Exactly. It's like nurturing a garden. You have to tend to it carefully for it to flourish.
I love that analogy.
Haha, thanks. But seriously, if we want a healthy discourse, we need to put in the effort.
Couldn't agree more. So any final thoughts?
Just that freedom of speech is a powerful tool. But like any tool, it can be used for good or harm.
Yeah, and it's up to us to use it responsibly.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great discussion.
Definitely. Looking forward to our next chat.